Welcome. We're expecting another big house today, so just bear with us as we let people in through the doors. Are we going to put the Slido up straight away, Howard, so that people can have a look, maybe?
Abraham, let's put it up. Great.
There we are. As you come in, ladies and gents, please take a look at the Slido link there. You can either go on at slido.com and then put the reference in, the hashtag LM150121, or you can go on via the QR reader there on the right hand side. So please do that. We've got some questions to ask you, and then later on during the webinar there will be a survey which we'll ask you to fill in towards the end of the hour. So all at the same address. So to start with, it's a survey, a questionnaire, and then a survey in terms of your thoughts towards the end of the hour. So as you're coming in, if you could please fill that in, it would be much appreciated. We are expecting a lot of people again today, so if you could just bear with us, it's just a couple of minutes to 12, so we'll give it 2 or 3 more minutes if you would. And of course, today is a repeat performance almost, because we had such a positive response before Christmas when we covered the building safety bill, and we weren't able to cover all aspects of it that we wanted to. So we've invited Steve Green back, and he's brought a colleague who I'll introduce later on. In fact, a good old friend of ours within CE, Damien Layden's going to be talking later, and Damien was on the Constructing Excellence Southwest board when we set things up, 8 years ago nearly, Damien, 8 years ago.
Yeah.
How time flies when you're having a good time, eh?
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I haven't aged a bit.
Living the dream, as I said earlier.
Andrew.
Yeah.
We're also using today Slido for questions and Q&A. So
Okay.
people have questions, please do go to Slido and put your question in. You'll also be able to vote on questions. So you'll see all the other questions that are being asked. If you think that's a good question, you can tap it, and that means that question will move up the list. And if it's popular, we'll get to the top. So please do take the time to use Slido. It will give us some good data, and certainly some data that Steve will refer back to. And from 1:45 today, we will open up the feedback survey. We'll keep that open until 1:15. So please do give us feedback so that we can look at how people have found the session and what we can improve.
Okay. Well, Howard, it is 12 o'clock, and as it's such an important agenda item, I think we need to give it the fullest amount of time we can. So I'll make a start with an introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Andrew Carpenter. I am Chief Executive of the Structural Timber Association, and also Constructing Excellence in the Southwest and the Midlands. And we are joined today as hosts of this webinar by Constructing Excellence nationally, the North East, Wales, and also by the CIOB in the Southwest. So we've got 7 organisations now coming together to bring you these weekly webinars, and you're most welcome. We've got another big house today, so obviously that's because of the important subject matter. As is normal now in this new year, we are using Slido because each week now we're getting in advance of 100 people sign in. So we are using Slido for everything, particularly there are some questions we're going to ask at the beginning now. So you can either go to slido.com and then hash LM150121, which is of course today's date, or the QR code on the right hand side. But please do sign in. And as Howard has just said, that would also allow you to ask questions. And depending on the number of questions, if you could, like those that are similar to what you were going to ask, that will give me an idea later of which priority questions to ask our guest speakers. And then finally, towards the end of the hour, we will be asking you to fill out a survey in terms of your thoughts on what you've heard during the hour, which gives us a good marker in terms of what we should do going forward. I'm going to introduce our speakers, Steve Green and Damien Layden later. Not easy to say Layden later, but I made a good effort. So I think Howard will go straight into the survey if we can. If we could have the first question up, Abraham, please. So, here we go. Have you read the draft building safety bill? I'm assuming that's a binary question, although nowadays binary questions aren't politically correct. But I'll see how you've written it. So let's have question 2, please, Abraham. How do you rate your own competence? How do you rate your own competence? And for those joining us, there are people coming in all the time. Please go to the slido.com. You can see on the left of the screen, either direct via the website or the QR code there at the top. Question 3, Abraham, please. How do you rate the general level of competence across the construction industry? How do you rate the general level of competence across the construction industry? And the next question, Abraham. How do you rate the maturity of the construction industry's behaviour towards delivering quality? How do you rate the maturity of the construction industry's behaviour towards delivering quality? This will give us an interesting benchmark in terms of your views on our sector on this very important topic. And is the next question the last one, Abraham? Have you heard of the Get It Right initiative, or GIRI as some people call it, or many people call it? Have you heard of the Get It Right initiative, or GIRI? Is that the last one, Abraham? Oh, no, there's more. Goodness, we've got more questions than we normally have. This is exciting, really exciting. Would you undertake training to improve your behaviour and skills in the area of quality? Howard, just tell me, how many questions have I got to expect today?
That's it. That's the lot.
That's it. Okay, one more. Well, that's 20% more than I'm used to. So exciting Friday. There we go. So those are the questions. We're going to keep those questions open so you can actually answer them if you haven't yet. We've got 33 replies, but we've got well over 100 in. So only about a third of the people have responded to date. So if you could just please answer those 6 questions. We're going to go through the answers towards the end of the presentation. That would be fabulous. Now then, just before Christmas in December, we decided to cover the Building Safety Bill as a topic. It was so popular. We had a huge audience and we had 3 very good speakers. But unfortunately, because of the content and the interest in terms of questions, we weren't really able to give Steve Green the time that he needed to cover his part of the agenda in full. So we thought it was appropriate, because it's such an important topic, that we invite Steve back. Steve is now working on his own with his own consultancy and is intricate in the GIRI movement, the Get It Right initiative. And I'm delighted to say that Steve is joined today by Damien Layden. Damien is a gentleman I've known for 7 or 8 years. When we first met, Damien was a senior director at the Hinkley Point C build and was one of the first board members for CESW. He's since then moved with the Barclay Group, and now I believe also, Damien, you have your own consultancy and working with GIRI. So that's great news. So Howard, is there anything you'd like to say before I hand over to Steve and then Damien?
No, absolutely. Let's get on with it, Andrew.
Okay. So, ladies and gents, sit back. Steve Green, all yours.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm, as Andrew said, picking up where I left off last time. And last time, my fellow presenters, if you like, set the context of the Building Safety Bill. So I felt I needed to do a little bit of context setting myself. What I would say, just in case I forget, is that previous presentation is available. You can watch the video if you go on the Leaders Meets site. And Richard Simler from Ball and Berry, who joined us then, will also join us on the panel to take questions at the end. So a bit of context setting and a personal view, if you like. 14th of June 2017. My birthday is the 13th of June. So I woke up on the 14th of June 2017 thinking I'd had a nightmare. I'd sort of drunk too much red wine. I couldn't believe what I was seeing on the television. It was the sort of thing you'd expect to see in less developed countries around the world. How could we have such a human tragedy on our doorstep? And then as the days passed and more information came out, then my feelings sort of changed to shame. I was ashamed to be part of an industry that could have been holding a major responsibility for what had gone on. And then over the 6 months, I think contractors up and down the country spent a lot of their time looking at what they got in the O&M manual, what was actually built on site, and more importantly, what actually complied. And it was a real wake-up call. We should not have had 72 people die for the industry to have such a wake-up call. So I think I know at the moment we've got another human tragedy with COVID, but I thought it was important just to reflect back on what happened on that date. Okay, so the style of this is a bit of a scrapbook from a contractor's point of view, and this is the timeline. So June, we had the tragedy. July, the independent review that was led by Dame Judith Hackett was established. And then in September, we have the inquiry. And you're probably aware there's two things that went on. The inquiry is still ongoing. This is where you can go on YouTube and see people being interviewed. But what we're talking about today is the Building Safety Bill, which started with this independent review. One thing I'd like to just have a look at while we're here is this quote. And this quote is from Captain Chelsea Sullenberger, or Sully, the guy who was responsible for the miracle on the Hudson. And this is a quote in terms of aerospace. So we purchased at great cost lessons literally bought with blood that we have to preserve as institutional knowledge and pass on to succeeding generations. Now, this is the aerospace approach to tragedies that happen when aircraft crash. I think what we've seen at Grenfell is something that this quotation is equally appropriate to, and we cannot let those lives be lost in vain. So, back to the timeline. So, September 17, the inquiry, interim report 2017, final report May 2018, and this is when we started to see things like ignorance and indifference in the industry, radical rethink required, roles and responsibilities need looking at, tighter regulatory control. And then that led to a consultation in 2019, and this is when the details started to come out. So this idea of a building safety regulator, the scope, which is basically buildings of 6 stories or 18 meters. And something that we will be majoring on later in the presentation is this competence steering group. So this all resulted in the draft safety bill that came out in July of last year. And I've pinched a slide from a GIRI presentation that Waitman's, the solicitors, did. Just to, I think it's a nice slide because it captures who the duty holder is. And you'll see throughout this, there's lots of similarities to CDM. So these are the key duty holders. We've got the client, the principal designer, the principal contractor, designers, contractors, and probably the new one is the building safety manager. Okay, so 3 documents. The draft building safety bill is 331 pages. The explanatory notes are 189 pages. But the interesting document to me, as a contractor and ex-QS, is this impact assessment. And this time around, I'm going to draw on the impact assessment because it allocates costs to implementing the bill. And I think they're really, really interesting. So there's the reference there. If you go onto the gov.uk website, you can pick up all these documents. So this applies throughout the life cycle of the building. It's going to be regulated by the building safety regulator, and for building safety regulator, you could read HSE. Now, this isn't surprising because Dame Judith Hackett was chair of the HSE, so she recognises its strength. I think anyone who's in the construction industry has a great deal of respect for the HSE. They understand the industry, they understand how to control the industry. We've seen significant fines for health and safety, we've seen fees for intervention, and I think from a quality perspective, we're always pushing to get quality up alongside health and safety, and having the HSE carrying out this role, I think is a great move in that direction. So what I'm going to walk you through now are the various gateways that we have to pass through in the new regulation. So the first gateway, gateway 1, is basically the client developer planning application stage. And this isn't a significant change, but that there will be more detail required in the form of a fire statement. And we'll now have a look at the impact assessment. So basically, they're saying that this is probably going to take a couple of days. Certainly in the early days, they anticipate 30% of applications will get kicked back by the building safety regulator and require some amendment. So they use a sort of generic £500 a day. So just getting through that gateway is £1,250. Now, this is where things start to get interesting, is gateway 2. So this is the deposit of full plans stage, and what you need to know is this is a hard stop. So in the past, if you went through the sort of approved inspector route, you could submit your plans and start within 48 hours. Now you can't start until you've got approval from the building safety regulator. So this is going to trigger a number of issues. Obviously the design, and when we get into the detail, you'll see why, but the design will have to be far further progressed than it would normally be at this point. Inevitably, there'll be delays as a result, and we're starting to wonder whether clients and their professional team will factor in the time that you'll need to get this information in and approved. The good thing is, there's so many people checking the design information at this stage, there should be less design errors, which should lead to less errors in construction. But we also ask the question, well, what does this mean to D&B? Will we still be able to do a D&B project with so much design having to be progressed up front? And to do that, inevitably, there'll be more earlier contractor involvement, or at least specialist subcontractor involvement in terms of structural and fire safety. Value engineering, definitely going to be less likely. Anyone who's read the Hackett report, she's obviously not a fan of value engineering, and I think this is a means of squeezing that out. The other thing that needs to be submitted at this point is something called a construction control plan. And I've got the details of that here. Now, initially I thought, well, this sounds like a sort of quality plan that you normally have on a project, but this is far more than that. So your construction control plan describes how the building safety and building regulation compliance will be maintained. So the draft bill is asking for mandatory occurrence reporting. So if you have an issue in terms of fire or structure, there's a mandatory reporting route, and they want to know in this plan how you're going to do that. They also want to know how you're going to collate and manage the information that, I think, again, we're getting familiar with this idea of the golden thread, the information that's handed over at completion. And also how you're going to check and assure the competence of those people involved in the project, and how change will be controlled and recorded. And this comes back to the value engineering point, that minor changes have got to be noted, major changes have got to have the approval of the building safety regulator. So obviously quite a bit of work in this, to the point that they think that the information submitted to Gateway 2 will take an additional 32 days. And this is 32 days additional to the time required to prepare a normal full plans submission. So 32 days at £500 a day, that's the £16,000. In addition to the submission costs, they're suggesting that there's going to be 115 additional days of time and cost around submitting the proposals for changes, because change seems inevitable. So this is saying 115 additional days of time at a cost of £42,000. Now, this bit in green I find really interesting, because what they're saying is we are assuming that the clerk of works will spend an additional 1 day undertaking site inspections on top of the 2.5 days inspections they do already. Really? You've got clerk of works on your projects that are doing 2.5 days inspection? Not my experience, but you know, this, hopefully, me poking with you with sticks as we go through will generate questions later. So Gateway 2 with the 42,000 cost here and the 16 there, we're up to 58,000. So this bill is starting to stack up. Now, crunch time, completion final certificate handover. So now the bill demands that the principal designer, the principal contractor, and the client co-sign a final declaration of compliance to say that the building as built is compliant. So inevitably, this satisfying the building safety regulator will become a contractual requirement. It's gonna, we always have pressure at handover, but this will be additional pressure because the building safety regulator is effectively a second client. It will, and not just at this stage, at application stage, you will get pushed to move to BIM level 2 and COBE. There's inevitably going to be disputes around who was responsible for not satisfying the building safety regulator, and unfortunately there'll probably be more buck, or shall we say risk passing. So again, coming back to what they reckon, so Gateway 3 is going to be 48 days, a cost of 24,000, and this is, as I say, it's updating that construction control plan, enhanced record on the as-built plans, updated fire emergency file, and to collate all this information and get it across. So that's another 24,000. So those are the costs at the various gateways. In addition to that, there's other duty holder requirements, and they think that's going to cost about £16,000 to £24,000. And this is basically just the additional checking of the respective areas of work and the competence checks to make sure that works. So I've budgeted 20,000 for this. And another, I really encourage you to have a look at this because some of the costs are really interesting. So what the bill assumes is that firms already comply with BIM level 1 and use a common data environment. What they say is if they don't currently comply, there's probably an additional cost of between £24,000 and £38,000 per building to comply. Now, just as an aside, last time we did a poll and said what percentage of your projects currently capture all their records digitally, we only had 16% that said every project. So that's going to be a lumpy cost on quite a few. And even those that do use BIM level 2 COBE, they estimate there's going to be a cost of £4,000 to £8,000 per building just to enter the information in. So I've put a sum of 31,000 for digitalisation of records. So these costs that I've just run through tot up to about 134,000 for the sort of typical in-scope project. As I've seen it, I'll just cover this. After we've handed over, there is a building occupancy stage. I'm not going to dwell on that. It's basically where the client, as an accountable person, appoints a building safety manager who then has an ongoing role for keeping the sort of building files and records up to date. From a contractor's point of view, that advantage is when you next come to work on a building, you'll have all the information you need. Okay, so we had a look at what the additional costs were, but there are costs that we can offset against that. And again, this is really interesting, particularly in terms of GIRI. So what they're saying is that because the design is being checked and checked again, and because there's far more thorough checking of the works on site, there will be cost savings. So the bill anticipates that on an average in-scope project, you will save £37,500 that would otherwise be spent on poor quality during the currency of the works. There'd be a further £40,000 saved at the point of handover when you could get reams of snagging lists, and then a further £37,500 saved in latent defects. So all in all, 37.5, we're about £115,000 saved there. And equally, they see, because the checking process is both in the design and the construction, there's going to be reduced redesign works that I've put. Again, this says such costs are assumed to be avoided in 10% of new buildings, saving 75 hours of work per building on average. So I've just done 10%, 75, 7.5, only £435. They also say that this pre-approval means that you won't get to a point where you've installed a product or system in a building that's subsequently found to be non-compliant and then has to be removed. And they're saying that can cost £80,000. Now, I suppose that could be anything. It could be the building safety systems, it could be the fire doors, it could be anything. But they're saying that's on 15% of new buildings. So I basically said, well, that's 15% of 80,000. So if we top those up, we've got a saving of 127 there against an additional cost of 134. So it's almost break even. The point I would make, because I'm an ex-contractor, is that the majority of this saving on defects would be costs that a contractor would incur. The majority of this cost in implementing the bill is the cost that the client and the designers would incur. So although on the face of it, the books seem to balance, actually robbing Peter to pay Paul might not be quite as straightforward as it appears. So, okay, so that was the numbers. Obviously, there's a significant risk with the HSE involved if you don't get it right. So if the business doesn't get it right, the company stop notices, loss of reputation, business, unlimited fines. But now, as an individual, if you're one of these duty holders that's signing off to say that a building's compliant and it's not, it's a criminal offence. It's could be a prison sentence. And just flipping back to this idea that principal contractor, principal designer, maybe not so much the client, but principal contractor, principal designer signing off, presumably there's a PI implication there. And who's going to insure you against that sort of thing? And if you're the principal designer that's signing off compliance, presumably you can't do that without inspecting. And does your brief include inspection? And is that included in the cost? And all these are questions that hopefully will trigger more questions later in the session. So, dwelling on competence. So, this is the story through a project and the testing of competence. So, a client decides to commission a new 8-story building. He wants a principal designer, but before he can appoint them, the client must assess the designer in terms of appropriate skills, appropriate knowledge, appropriate experience, and appropriate behaviours, and the organisational capability to carry it out. So this is the client's duty, and to assist the client in that duty, statutory guidance created, if you like, as the benchmark that the client uses to judge those that he's appointing against. And then the same thing happens when it comes to the contractor. So before the client appoints the contractor, he must again assess the appropriate skills, knowledge, experience, behaviours, and organisational capability before appointing them. And again, there'll be statutory guidance. Again, a little quirk that quite interests me is that during construction, let's just shrink that a bit so everyone can see it. During construction, the principal contractor must make sure that anyone they appoint, and it doesn't say the same in terms of knowledge, skill, experience, but anyone they appoint to carry out building work is competent for their role or is being trained and appropriately supervised by a competent supervisor. So does that beg the question, does that mean if you're an architect, you can't use someone who's being trained and appropriately supervised? You know, it's only competent people that can deliver. So we've asked this question this time. This is what we said last time. So in terms of competence, we're talking about appropriate skills, appropriate knowledge, appropriate experience, appropriate behaviours, and organisational capability. Interestingly, this is what we said last time. So when we asked the question, how do you rate your own competence? The average score was 6.5. The highest score was sort of 30% that rated their competence as an 8. And then when we asked, how do you rate the general level of competence in the industry? It dropped. So the average score was 5.6, and we were sort of running between 5 and 8. So it's going to be interesting when we have a look at the Slido poll, whether that's moved at all. And another extract from the impact report. And I think what the government are realising is that within the construction industry, we've got an awful lot of SMEs that are actually delivering the work on site. So what they're saying is, as we go through this competence steering group, as this work matures, they'll ask the steering group and its members to consider how the small and micro businesses can be minimised in the disadvantage of sort of developing their competence. And this is where I think GIRI come in. And this is where I'm going to hand over to Damien, because I think this is where GIRI can help in terms of making sure the industry have got appropriate behaviours through everything they do, from clients, leaders, to designers, to people out on site. So I'll stop sharing and I'll hand over to Damien.
Thanks, Stephen. So, good afternoon, and thanks, Stephen, for handing over to me. So, my name's Damien Layden, and it's a pleasure to join you guys today. I've been working with GIRI now for, it shocked me, but nearly 5 years. Bit of background, it's a not-for-profit organisation, so we do it for the love, and it's probably the right thing to do. And it's born out of a group of people chatting in the ICE and just realising that we can constantly keep making the same sorts of mistakes and errors on sites, and thought we should do something about it. From that, we got a group of contractors together. It's the year about 2015 this was, and we've got an independent research company and convinced 14 contractors to contribute at varying levels of success, from really good records to maybe not quite what you'd want. Let's shared that information and we pulled it together, and we wrote this paper here that's on the website, Strategy for Change. And in there, it did a line which was interesting with the findings of the Egan and the Latham report and other reports since. What it showed was, in terms of spend, if you take the GDV, the spend on construction is about 100 billion in the UK. Circa 20 billion of that comes through as error each year, 20 billion pounds, and that was a bit of a shocker. So if you think about most main contractors are anywhere between 1.5% and 3% going towards their bottom line, and 20% of that is basically going in skips and rework. And when we broke that down, we saw direct costs for error, resources used in correcting, so someone's messed up and they've got to use their own resources to correct their work, was around 5%. We looked at resources that follow on, so impacting others, so they were minding their own business and the error impacted them in one way or another, be it design or material specification, whatever it may be. Unrecorded, the things that get swept underneath the proverbial mat and we find out later, sometimes not. And then latent defects, things that affect our clients and our customers, normally past defects, and they poke their nose up, around 3%. So it added up to a significant amount of money, and we sort of thought to ourselves, well, and so what should we do now? So we decided that we couldn't just leave it there, that wouldn't be right. And we come up with, at that point in time, a strategic aim for Geary to improve the construction industry, productivity and quality by eliminating error was the sort of strapline. The byproduct from this is obviously, without saying it really, is the sustainability positives and the carbon footprint positives that come with doing things right first time. So when you then take that to the conversation debate today that we're talking about, the Dame Judith Hackett report, building safety, there's a lot of things that started to tune in with where the Geary initiative has been pushing. So if you look at the unfortunately, what happens is, and it's happened time and time again, is where our industry has a bit of a mirror put up in front of it. If you read that top one there, change control and quality assurance are poor throughout the process. What is initially designed is not what is being built, and quality assurance of materials and people is seriously lacking. Quite damning, really. And if you look at what happened within the safety around 2000, I think it was, when we started to look at programs such as SUSE and IIF and started talking about the cultural and behavioural topics really, and how we can get into it, not just relying on procedures and process, we felt to ourselves in Geary, this is something we should really sort of look into and push a bit further. So when you broke down the Geary aims and objectives, and there in yellow we just highlighted what comes out in the building safety bill: create a culture and working environment to get it right from the start, change attitudes and harness leadership, responsibility to reduce error and improve quality, engage all our stakeholders, right from client and concept all the way through, share knowledge and error reduction, a bit like we've got more mature in safety, where we talk about incidents, accidents in a positive, open manner, and improve our skills as an industry as a whole. So we went after that, and I'll talk more to that in a minute. So then when you take where those synergies are again, you look at the CDM 1994, and on the health and safety website, you see behaviour change and work engagement practices within the construction sector. And I think most people would say we broke a glass ceiling 20 years ago, and there's obviously more work to do, but it did make a difference and a tangible difference. And the things that the draft building safety bill are calling for and recognising as things we need to address are akin to those that Geary has brought forward as well: sharing knowledge, changing behaviours, and developing competencies within our teams and the people we work with. So current Geary memberships from that, we've been steadily growing, which is really positive, from a group of 3 or 4 people who started through the 14 companies that initially joined and did the strategy for change, now to 59. And what's really, really interesting around that for me is it's one of the only initiatives I've seen where you've literally got government advisory bodies, architects, M&E engineers, tier ones, insurance brokers, all joined behind a common cause to reduce error and increase productivity and efficiency. So those are the guys and girls who we've got joined at the moment, and you can see there's some quite big programs of work, government led. What's also interesting is some of these bodies aren't CITB accredited, so they can't claim the levy. Zurich and Marsh in their insurance, they've been very, very supportive. Obviously, it's in their interest to be, but very supportive towards the cause and being quite vocal about having to get better at what we do. And there's a couple more guys who are going to join as well. So when we broke down the initial actual piece of research, most people would think, oh, it's the guy with the trowel, or it's the guy with the hammer, and blame the poor tradesman who's just trying his best. And it was further from the truth. So as you see down the line, the list there: inadequate planning, late design change, poorly communicated design, poorly coordinated incorrect design, inadequate attention to paid-in design to construction, like can you build it? Excessive commercial pressures due to timing of instructions or the like, poor interface management. Do the materials work together? Does the detail work together? Right through to supervisory skills. So we took those and thought to ourselves, right, we keep coming up against these key things: culture, planning, design, supervision, and underneath supervision, I put communication. So on the right hand side of your screens, the highlighted text there comes from the Building Safety Bill, not from GUI. A culture and behavioural change of similar magnitude is now required across the whole sector to deliver an effective system that ensures complex buildings are safe for people to live in for many years after the original construction. And I'll let you carry on and read. But the bottom line is we are all accountable, and we all have input and touch this in our day-to-day professions. So sharing knowledge, changing behaviour, and developing competency was when we started to hone down. So what do we want to do, and how do we go about that at the moment? So currently, I've been very pleased to come and join you guys today, but also been on other webinars. We've got e-learning, obviously on YouTube, we're on LinkedIn, and obviously our website itself. Are different ways we try to spread the message, share what we've learned, and actually just get people involved and motivated to try and support us and just spread the word, really. In terms of skills development, we've brought forward with the CITB 3 accredited courses now. So we did that it took about 18 months. We had three teams, if you like, Hockteeth and so Robert McAlpine and Berkeley with one team, and then there's 2 other teams, and they brought forward 3 courses, as you can see on screen: supervisor management, interfacing and design, and then leadership training from CEO through to senior project teams. And they've been well received. We've got about 1,000 courses now booked for this year. Sounds quite a lot, but we could do with some more, really, just to be able to get the message out there. They are all now, if there's anything good come out of COVID, which isn't a lot, they are all remote delivery as well. They're available basically over Teams and Zoom. Some of the courses, one of the big things that we come across was just being brave enough, a bit like the safety message: press pause to avoid error. And I suppose if you read the text there, this is akin to, if you look at the blue lights or the military, they use things called tabletop exercises to run scenario briefs and just try things out and see what would happen and what if scenarios, etc. And we don't normally do a lot of that in construction. We normally get 2 to 4 weeks notice to start site, and away we go with a different team, with new subcontractors building something that's never been built before. So press pause is one of the many tools that come through in the 3 training provisions that we've between us with CITB have come up with. So in terms of next steps, we're looking at a frequency rate, which isn't quite there yet, but we're trying hard with the members of trying to have a common measurement, if you like, through the industry. And we've also got a project startup day course, which is so far proved very, very popular and had some benefits. So that's good. The actual email address down there, if you're interested, and the website itself is Get It Right Initiative. I'm not a salesman, as you can tell. All of us are doing this for free. It just seems like the right thing to do. And as we say to each other at our board meetings, it's by industry for industry. Hopefully we can make an impact and not have another Grenfell. Thank you. Be happy to take questions. Hand over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Damien, and thank you, Steve, very much. If there are any questions, I think we're going to go to Slido to ask them. However, Howard, could you perhaps put the results of the Slido survey up?
Yeah, let's put the survey up. This is what is interesting.
Would you like to run through those?
Yeah, happy to, Andrew, no problem. I'm sure Steve would like to also join in on this.
Yeah, we'll compare and contrast.
Yeah, absolutely. There we go. So the first one, got 50 answers. Interestingly, the highest score is 1. So 30% response saying no, they haven't read it. Average score of 50. So 50%.
Well, is that 50 people completed it?
50 people completed it. So
Oh yes, and 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's similar to last time from memory. I haven't got that one to hand, but it's interesting, and it's something that's it's not going to change. Well, this is interesting in itself. Theoretically, it's not going to change the whole of construction, but certainly Dame Judith Hackett's hope is that the whole of the construction industry embraces what's proposed across all projects, not just those in scope projects. So I think over the coming years, more people will read it, more people will be aligned to it. I hope, I'm sure they will.
Okay, next one, please, Abraham.
Okay, that's interesting. So last time we had an average score of 6.5, so we're now an average of 6.6. It's looking as it's moving.
The average.
Someone else gave a result.
It's similar. It's not significantly different. So 6% see them as selves as 100% competent, which is encouraging. But it's a similar profile, I think. Oh,
not a very optimistic view of the sector.
No, the last time we had an average score of 5.6, so we're now down to 4.8. Yeah, interesting. So I think in that case, Howard, I don't think that could be described as optimism bias. So,
no, certainly not there. Okay, next one then, please. This one will be interesting for the Geary.
yeah, I guess it's similar sort of profile to competence, but worse.
I think the interesting word here is how do you rate the maturity? So I hope people have sort of picked that up. I mean, there's a huge great opportunity here, which I think obviously the stats from Geary show. So I think one's got to be careful that we don't get complacent, and that's about maturity.
Yeah, and I think as Damien said, what we're looking for is what we describe as the maturity that we've got in the health and safety side. We'd look to develop a similar maturity and a mindset, if you like, on quality. Interesting.
That begs a question, though, as to whether, because health and safety is strictly enforced, in other words, it's compliance, whether the building safety bill, when it actually becomes law, will have the same impact.
I'm sure that's Dame Judith's hope, yeah. And equally, from Dame Judith's perspective, the threat of what's coming, again, she hopes will drive people to change now. She keeps saying, don't wait for the legislation. You need to change now. You know, this sort of stuff kills people. Change now.
Well, I think we've got a question that might look at that in a minute. So we'll come back to that one. Okay, so the next one, please, Abraham. Now, that is really quite frightening, I think, to be honest.
Yeah.
Damien, huge great opportunity here for you.
Massive opportunity, surprising. Marketing is not our strong point, obviously.
Well, show this to your marketing department.
Yeah, well, we haven't got one. It's us, so they're in lies the problem.
That's right. Position heal thyself.
Yeah, more work to do. Okay.
Okay, next one then, please, Abraham.
Ah.
And there you go. That's your opportunity there, Damien.
That's huge. Very interesting. Yeah, look forward to emails and contacts. Brilliant.
So those are the questions that we answered earlier, Howard. Are we going to change the Slido survey now so that those can answer our own requirements? And we'll get to the questions. I was just about to suggest we do that because we've only got 10, 15 minutes left. So Steve Damien, you can see the questions on the screen. There's an emphasis upon the need to change behaviours. The industry has a poor record of such change. How do you think it will now occur? Only by legislation? Question mark.
Well, I'll start and then Damien can pick up if you like. I think, as I said before, the threat of forthcoming legislation, I think Dame Judith probably sees, knowing the industry so well from the HSE perspective, she probably sees that regrettably, that's the only way the industry will change. But I'm hoping that the GIRI and the GIRI approach and the fact that improving quality it has so many benefits that we can convince people that they need to address their quality. I don't know what you think, Damien.
I think it comes in a number of different avenues, really. I mean, there's a moral obligation there that we've had 20 years of addressing the quality piece and raising it up to board level. And I think now the safety piece, and I think now the quality and error reduction, hopefully will do that. The difference between the safety and this is there's £20 billion to go after. So there's actually profit to put back in the coffers. So can we afford it? Answering one of those questions, I think we can afford it. The money's there. We keep pulling it down the drain. So yeah,
I suppose the question is actually, Damien, can we afford not to?
Well, this is it, and it's absolutely, yeah, and we all know that if you walk onto site, it's well managed, it's tight and tidy, it's normally successful, it's normally making money, and the team morale's good. So a lot of this stuff is stuff that we talk about, and we just give those skills in the training courses. And so
if we look at the questions, they're moving around now, so they're difficult to keep track of. But I think question 2 is we've covered the cost, I think.
Yeah.
The second one in line here is, when do you think the bill is likely to pass into act? And how do we persuade our clients to start to act if it is enacted already?
Yeah, I think that's one for our friend Richard Simler, because he's closer to the progress of the bill.
Could we bring Richard Simler into play, Howard, please? He is on the list. Could we bring Richard in, perhaps? While we're waiting for that, Steve, I actually had a meeting this week with Lord Stephen Greenhalgh, who's the minister responsible for the Building Safety Bill.
Okay.
And that was with my STA hat on. But what was interesting, we had a long chat about all sorts of different things. And he was asking me questions, particularly around building materials, of course. But one of the conversations we had was around maybe moving the emphasis from purely quality to excellence, because I was talking about constructing excellence and the work we'd done since Latham and Egan, and he was very interested in that. Rather interestingly, he hadn't heard of constructing excellence. He hadn't heard of Mark Farmer, just to put it into perspective. So there's some work to be done, and I'm arranging some meetings behind the scenes. But I thought his comments about moving from quality to excellence was actually a very interesting one. Richard, I've done some padding out for time to give you a chance to come in and maybe answer this question.
Hello, Andrew.
Hello, how are you, Richard?
I'm okay, thank you. Yes.
Good to see you.
And you? Yeah, the particular question as to when the Act is likely to, or when it's likely to become in force. In a nutshell, I don't know, but I would think it's extremely unlikely to be this year. Possibly next year, I think, would be the best educated guess. The draft was published in July, as we know. It's then been scrutinised by a parliamentary committee who have thrown some questions back at MHCLG that need to be responded to before it can proceed. So the scrutiny committee responded in November. So we need to wait for the response to the scrutiny committee questions before we can gauge how quickly it will then pass through the
I think
various.
that's probably a good answer, Richard, because again, in my meeting with Lord Stephen Greenhalgh in the week, I was asking him questions about the building material consultation, combustible material consultation, which had gone in last May, and he said he couldn't give me a date when that might be out because he's busy. Then we had a talk about the future housing standards, which again is with MHCLG, and it's going through the department. So I think they've got a lot of work on because the consultation responses they're getting are far, far more than they're used to. And even though their staff has grown exponentially, they're still struggling with it. But there we are. Okay. So where's my next question, Abraham? Can you bring one up? Because they're moving around. That's better. There's an emphasis upon the need to change behaviours. We've done this one, haven't we?
Yeah, I think we have. I'd go back to the main list. I think the main ones.
Yeah, we've done that one as well, Abraham. So let's talk about the 8 stories. If 8 stories is high risk, is it thought likely that this will have an effect on placemaking and reduce the desire for higher buildings? Steve, Damien, who wants to kick off on that one?
Well, firstly, Richard would probably say 6 stories is high risk, not 8. I think there was an example that I put up that referred to 8 stories, but it's sort of 18 meters, 6 stories. Is that right, Richard?
The draft bill talks about the either or.
Yeah.
It talks about more than 6 stories or more than 18 meters. So you can't kind of just slim out your floors just to duck under. Is the way it's written in the draft bill.
So it's an interesting question. So do we think it's going to remove the desire for higher buildings? I think not in places like London. It depends how much you're paying for the land, I think, quite frankly. I don't know what your view, Damien, is.
100%. It's about the land value. It's just it wouldn't be viable. So I don't think it's going to affect that. And a lot of the work's in the facade system anyway, and a lot of the things that just weren't on the market, you couldn't buy them, are coming forward now. You know, with the cavity trays and things. So I think the industry, one thing we are really good at as an industry is coming up with ways to get around things and workarounds and innovation.
I think there are other factors at play now, though, aren't there, gents? I mean, post COVID-19, I think there's the people and their views on whether they want to live in high-rise cities.
That's then we talk about demand, and that's something.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's going to have an effect, gents, at some stage.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so 2 more questions. What, in your view, are the critical core competencies that the sector should be looking to develop and practice on a daily basis to meet the bill compliance? Who wants to start on that one?
Well, from Gary's point of view, the first one is communicate and be conscious of the design right from day one. And some of the bigger programs of work, I suppose you can say it's a luxury. You'll have a core team there quite early up in the design and bringing it forward, and a lot of other places you don't. So I think communication and early involvement are 2 big ones in the design process, and then it will make you compliant and efficient and make money.
Excellent. And then the last question then, gents, is around the guides or potential guides for clients. So are there any specific guides, e.g. a client's guide for how they should perform?
Okay.
Oh, there's another one crept in.
So one for you, Richard. I haven't seen a client's guide, but I don't know whether you have, Richard.
No, Steve, I haven't seen a guide as such.
We are, as Constructing Excellence, updating the client's construction commitments best practice guide. That's due out shortly, and we've withheld issuing it until now because we wanted to get the construction playbook included. That isn't specific to this particular topic, although it is covered. Quality is covered. I wonder, Steve, whether this might be something for the the group that you chair in CE to look at?
Yeah, I think it is. I think we said that one of our key objectives this year was to run alongside the building safety bill and everything that it impacts on, because it is the thing this year, I think, in terms of quality.
But I think a client guide, a how-to guide, cat sat on the mat, would be very helpful.
Yeah, I don't know whether that's more, because has Richard been doing something in the southwest that's more clients?
There is something, but it's not specific to this. But yes,
Okay.
we'll have a look at that. We'll take that away, Steve, perhaps.
Okay.
Richard's on the call as well, by the way. So final question before we get into the final survey. Do we know what the structure of the building safety case report might look like and what the expectations might be during construction to support this? Is that BLM? Is that Black Lives Matter?
I don't know.
Or have I got the wrong interpretation there?
Is it meant to be BIM, Andrew?
Is it BIM?
I'm guessing it is.
Like BLM.
I think it might be BIM, Andrew.
Oh right, okay. Sorry about that. I'm so fixated by the Black Lives Matter, having watched Sky Sports every night. So do we know what the structure of the building safety case report might look like and what the expectations might be during construction to support this? Let's assume it's BIM, which is far more likely.
Yeah, I think I highlighted this construction control plan. So that this is described as how the building safety and building regulations will be maintained. So the framework for mandatory occurrence reporting, how the information will be collated and managed into the golden thread, and how competencies checked and how change control will be recorded. I'm surprised no one's drafted a construction control plan yet as a sort of education piece to the industry so that we could all comment. Perhaps it's a job for construction excellence. I don't know.
David,
I think,
do you have anything to add?
No.
No. Okay. Well, look, it is 1:01, so we're right on the cusp of the finishing time. So the first thing I'd like to do is thank Damien and Steve for giving of your time and your expertise. So thank you for that. We do still have the survey, Howard, don't we, on the Slido, which we would encourage you, please, to fill in so that we get some feedback, which is really useful for us when we're planning future events and activities, and also to feed back to Steve and Damien that they can take back into Geary and so on. Also, thank you to Howard and Abraham for hosting us, and Richard, thank you as well for chipping in and giving us a couple of answers. Next week, if you were with us last week, you'll remember that we had an excellent presentation by Fergus Harridance of Bays on the construction playbook. But as he got to start answering the 80+ questions, his Wi-Fi went down at home, power cut, and we couldn't answer any of the questions. We're doing some work behind the scenes with him to try and bring those questions to a manageable number, and he's agreed to return next week to continue the story. So the only thing is he can't make it at midday, so we've moved the time next Friday to 2 o'clock. So if you're interested in the second half, if you like, of the construction playbook webinar, please join us next week at 2 o'clock. And then the week after, we're going for an update on AIM-CH, which is a very impressive and very interesting and valuable study on housing, and in particular modular housing, MMC housing, and so on. So that's what we've got to look forward to in the next 2 weeks. Right now, it is just after 1 o'clock. Thank you for all for attending. Hope you found it useful. Please fill in the survey. I wish you a good afternoon and a very pleasant weekend. Thanks all. Bye-bye now.
Right.